welcome. It's Wednesday. How are you guys doing? I hope you I don't know if enjoy is a good word or not, but I hope that you got something out of the videos that you watched yesterday and you kind of have an understanding of what it was like back then. I mean, it's kind of weird to have like things that happen in your life in history books now, but that's how it is the older you get. So, what we're going to look at today is the Iraq War. And believe it or not, we still have people in Iraq. In fact, today, my son is actually deployed to Iraq right now. And so we still have people there. Okay, so this is what happened. In 2002, there were concerns that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And it wasn't just a concern of President Bush, which when they find out there aren't any, they kind of like say it was all him and he was the only one saying it, but that's not true. There were a lot of people that were saying Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. There were intelligence agencies of the United States, like the CIA, that were saying it. There were senators, there were congressmen, there were people from other countries, like England, and the UN suspected that he also had weapons of mass destruction. So there were a lot of people that thought Saddam Hussein had them. He would not allow inspectors in. Remember, this was like from the very beginning of when he surrendered that he would not allow inspectors in to his country to verify that there weren't any weapons. So this became a huge issue. And so there's kind of an ultimatum given, and he chooses not to allow inspectors. So in 2002, the troops, again, it's a coalition, it's not just the United States, it's other countries too, backed by the UN. They go in to Iraq in order to uh, oust, I guess you could say, Saddam Hussein, find the weapons of mass destruction, and destroy them before they hurt anybody. Because again, like I said yesterday, this is a bad dude. He wasn't like, being kind and people were just picking on him. He was a super bad dude. He did mean, horrible things to many, many, many people. Um, so I always think it was interesting. So one thing that they did was they gave them playing cards. Like the 52 cards that you guys play cards with, yeah, that Nash does magic tricks with. So they sent playing cards, but they had the pictures of the people that they were looking for. So like Saddam Hussein was on the ace, and his bigger leaders were on the aces, and then based on where you were in the rank was based on what card you were on. But there were 52 people that they were trying to find, and so they would give it to soldiers so that they knew who they were looking for. So when they were playing cards, like the picture would be in their mind and they could remember who they're looking for, and that was to help them. Now, fun fact, when I was trying to find you guys like a video or a display of the cards so you could see them, I discovered that this was not the only time or the only war that they ever did this for, that this is normal practice. That when there was World War II, that they gave them German weaponry, like what a tank was, an airplane, and stuff like that, so that the soldiers would recognize it when they saw it, so that they would know if it was friendly or a foe. Friend or foe. Friend is your friend and a foe is your enemy. So they've been doing this for a really long time. The Iraq War wasn't the first time, but it was the first time I had ever heard about it. I wasn't around during World War II, obviously. Okay, so so Iraq has always had issues because they have three different groups of people that tend to kind of fight against each other. And there's a lot of like racial issues and prejudice and stuff between the groups. So the Kurds we already talked about, they were in the north, and Saddam Hussein absolutely hated them and would often deny them food or rain down mustard gas on them or whatever, because they were not his friendly, happy people. The other two groups of people in Iraq are the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims. And they also are not real happy with each other either. So you have these three groups of people in this relatively small country, and they're all kind of fighting against each other. And sometimes they try to work with the United States to fight against the group they don't like. So it's all these tribes and yeah. So Iraq, Bush did not just want to go in, win the war, and leave. He was concerned about something called a power vacuum. So a power vacuum happens. That's my knee. I'm sorry. A power vacuum happens when the leader of the country and their government are pulled out, and then all those three groups that we just talked about, they would be fighting for who gets to take control. And so you would have what's called a civil war within the country. And Bush did not want that to happen. So what President Bush did is he didn't pull out. Like I said, we're still there today. They were trying to set up a different government, but they made a lot of blunders, which is in your book. You know, they got rid of everybody in the Ba'ath organization, and yes, it's Ba'ath, Baath, it's Ba'ath. The Ba'ath Party, including teachers and that. So they turned a lot of Iraqi people against them. Now, the soldiers also did a lot of good for the Iraqi people. Most of them were scared to death of Saddam Hussein. And they were not happy that he was in power, and they were not happy that he ruled over them. But they were scared to support the United States because, again, we tend to go in, win a war, and leave, and the people fend for themselves, and it's never a good thing to do that. But that's what we do sometimes. And so President Bush didn't want to do that. He wanted them to help them to set up a new government. He wanted to help them to set up a police force that wasn't corrupt, because a lot of the police were corrupt. They would arrest you and take bribes and stuff, and for doing nothing, and then it was not a good situation. And so the United States troops go in and they start building schools, and they build infrastructure. So like they get water, they get electricity. There's a lot of good things that they do for the Iraqi people. But you still have people who don't want them to be there, and so they would set up bombs and stuff in the streets, and a lot of soldiers have lost limbs over there. They've lost their lives over there, and so pray for my son if you think about it. Sam is over there. Okay, there's like not a lot of fighting, but you still have the terroristic stuff and stuff. Okay, so then we come up to 2004. So 2004, because every 4 years there's an election, right? We're coming up on 2020. So in 2004, George W. Bush runs against John Kerry. Now, John Kerry is the Democratic candidate, and George W. Bush is the Republican candidate. But John Kerry is kind of an interesting person. He doesn't really stick to one idea or the other. He kind of like does his own thing. So, for example, he went to Vietnam. He was drafted. He went to Vietnam as a reporter. He worked for the Stars and Stripes, which is a newspaper for the military. And when he came back, he spoke against the Vietnam War, which got a lot of Vietnam vets very upset. Because he didn't just say, oh, I think the war was bad. He also talked about how all the people over there were bad, and they did bad things. And, of course, like in anything, you have those that do the right thing and those that do the wrong thing. But he was lumping them all together, which made them quite upset. And then, like for the Iraq War, John Kerry voted for it, but then he voted against it, and then he gave money for it, and then he said he shouldn't have given money for it, and didn't give more money for it. And so he was known as a flip-flopper, because he would say something and then say something else. And I am looking for video to see if I can find, because I literally actually heard him say, well, I voted again for that before I voted against it, before I voted for it. And it's like, well, which side are you on? And so that was a problem. His wife, I don't know if you've ever used Heinz ketchup, but his wife is that Heinz. That's who she is. And for reasons that I still don't understand today, that became a big issue in the campaign, that she was from the Heinz fortune. And I don't know why. I really don't. I thought that was very foolish and silly. And I still think it's foolish and silly, because I want to know what John Kerry's going to do if he becomes president. I don't really care if his wife likes ketchup or is in ketchup, or or she's a school teacher. It does not matter. It's, what is he going to do? So that was a big thing. And he does. He literally says, I voted against that before I voted for that, before I voted against that, and then I voted against that and for that. And he never really knew where he stood. And we were at war at the time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's very seldom that the United States will elect a new president when we're at war. So John Kerry did not win the 2004 election. Again, George W. Bush won and served out his second term. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I covered that. So, another big thing that happens in his presidency is Hurricane Katrina. So, in 2005, there was a hurricane that was off the coast that they thought would hit possibly New Orleans. And so they told the New Orleans governor, they told all the people, but you know how the hurricane thing works, right? They say, oh, it's coming, it's bad, it's awful, we're all going to die. And then it doesn't come, or it scoots around, or it peters out, and so eventually people stop believing it. And that's kind of what happened here. So there were other hurricanes that were supposed to come and hit New Orleans, and they didn't. And so what happens is they say the hurricane's coming, and the federal government says, hey, you really need to evacuate the people to the governor of Louisiana and the mayor of New Orleans. Okay. But they have been through this before. And so they don't. And then the storm gets closer and closer, and then we definitely know that unless the hand of God goes in there and moves it, the storm's going to hit New Orleans. But by then, it's too late to move people. So when we were in New Orleans this summer, we talked to a bus driver, and he was there during the hurricane and stuff. And so he told us all about that and how it was just too late when he finally gave the order to evacuate. So our bus driver had actually gotten out because he got his family out early. But by the time the order came, it was no way to get out. Because think about it. Think about H1 during rush hour. Now think that everybody's trying to get out of Honolulu. Okay? And that's what happened. They could not get out because there were too many people on the road. And so what happens is the hurricane comes. And New Orleans, so like the water levels here, and they have these things called levees. And then New Orleans is actually below sea level. Okay? It's like in a delta. Okay? And so they have these levees. And for years and years, they were being told that the levees could break and the levees could come apart. And so that's actually what happened in this hurricane. The levees gave way, and the whole place filled with water. And our bus driver told us that it was copious amounts of water. The water was everywhere, and it was really bad. Now, the only place that didn't get flooded was the French Quarter. And the French Quarter is interesting fact. Again, the bus driver, he was a great tour person. He told us that when the French came to New Orleans, that they built that there, and somebody asked them, why are you building here? And they said, because it will never flood here. And that's true. It still did not flood in the French Quarter, which I thought was fascinating. But much of New Orleans was devastated. There was no power, no electricity, no water, no sewer, No nothing. I mean, it was a mess. Our bus driver said downtown was like a ghost town, and you could only get through it with boats and stuff. I'm going to see if I can find you videos for that too. So when I'm making this video right now, I don't have any, but I should have some connected by the time this goes online. All right. So a big thing, there's like laws. So even though the federal government wanted to go in right away and help, and they did in Mississippi, New Orleans, Louisiana's governor would not say, hey, come help us. The mayor would not say, hey, come help us. And the president can't send help until they ask. So Mississippi got hit with the same hurricane. It was really bad there too, but they asked right away and got help right away. Louisiana, the governor and the mayor of New Orleans, they didn't ask for help. They just sat and complained. And so eventually they asked for help, and eventually George W. Bush was able to send help through FEMA and National Guard and stuff. It was really bad. There were people on top of their houses because their house was completely flooded and all they had was their roof. They went to the, I always want to call it the Astrodome, but I know it's not. It's a Superdome. And they filled the Superdome, and the people were crazed, and they broke things in the Superdome on purpose. They were mad. It was just a really tough time. And so you always look for somebody to blame. So everybody blamed President Bush, even though, part of it, a lot of it, wasn't his fault because of the way our laws are written. You have to wait for certain things. And because hurricanes come and go and they aren't ever what people say, they didn't believe. And so there were a lot of things that worked together to make this a really bad situation. And that's what happened for Katrina. Okay. And actually still today, okay, so that was what, 2000, no, I forgot the date, 5, I think. Let me double check. Yes, so it's 2005. This is 2020. Yes, we were there in the summer, so 2019, and there's still places that have not been rebuilt. The Ward district is still, there's still houses that the school has never been, anybody's been back in that school at that time. There's still the sign welcoming people back to school way back for the first day of school in 2005 because nobody's been back since. So the place is still pretty devastated. So we've already talked about the reforms that he tried to get through, which were Social Security. So he did get some stuff through for Social Security. So now there are savings plans that you can do. IRAs came out of that. Because he didn't want the young people to pay in and not get anything out. So there's other things you can do. My husband and I, we don't think there'll be any money left in Social Security. So, and he was the first president to go to Africa and try to help those countries on that continent. He worked really hard to get rid of malaria because malaria is a disease that we don't have in the United States because there's medicines and there's all kinds of stuff. So when you go to other countries, you take malaria pills, which now they're talking about it for other things. And so there's ways to prevent malaria. It's a very preventable thing. And so he sent malaria medicine, mosquito nets, insecticide, when you spray off on yourself and stuff so that mosquitoes don't bite you, same stuff. He sent that all to Africa, and he worked very closely with the countries in Africa to better their lives because he really had a heart for helping people better their lives. And so he tried to do that. And a lot of other countries go in and tell countries in Africa how to do, what to do. But he felt that they had the best plan themselves. They lived there. They worked there. They understood the culture there. And so he just helped them with their plans and encouraged them. Okay? Now, at the end of his presidency, big issues occurred. The economy went... because there were laws that were passed that the banks had to give loans to people who really couldn't afford to pay them back because somebody decided that the loan giving was based on people's race instead of their ability to pay it back. So there's two bubbles that burst at this time in history. So one of them is the housing bubble. So people weren't paying their mortgages, and when they weren't paying their loans back, nobody was making any money off of it. Nobody was getting the money that they gave out, and so those were being sold around. And eventually, some banks owned so many bad mortgages that the bank collapsed, which means that the bank didn't have any money to give to the people who invested in the bank, and so they collapsed. The other big bubble that collapsed was the internet bubble. So the internet is really gearing up at this time, and people would say, "Oh, I have this great company," and it wasn't anything but an internet address. And so investors would invest in it, and everything fell apart. So people lost lots of money, including my family. We lost a lot of money because we had money in the stock market in those the internet stuff. And so literally we lost like 80%, I think my husband said, of our retirement on that. So the car companies were in trouble. So President Bush gave the car companies money, which I didn't agree with, but he did. And to bail them out. And then just like now we're all getting a check from the government, we all got a check from a government then too. And it was to stimulate the economy because he figured if people got money, they'd go spend money. That didn't work. And it ended up not being great for taxpayers because that actually got added onto our income in the end, and we had to pay taxes on it. I have no idea if that's what's going to happen this time, but that's what happened last time, so I'm a little leery. So he used government money, which is taxpayer money, because the government doesn't make money, they just take money, to bail these companies out. And so that was something that President George Bush did that I did not agree with, that I thought was a bad idea. But that's, presidents make their own decisions, yeah. So that is everything I have. We're going to be, again, taking your test tomorrow. Please look at the videos that I have attached. And I will see you on science. I don't know. So have a good day. And I will be doing a science review. And I'll see you then. All right? Bye.